All right, so now that y'all kind of have a gist of how the semester is going to go, we're going to start actually getting into the content. Of course, if you have questions about what's going on with the semester, when are things due, anything at all, you can always email me or we can have a Zoom chat or whatever y'all need. But today we are going to talk about biology. And obviously, you're in general biology. We love that for you. But what does that mean? What is biology? What is included in biology? All of that. And that's going to be kind of the topic for today. So we're going to define what biology is. So biology is the study of life by definition. And a lot of times when we think about life, we think about something like this. So this is a beautiful coral reef. And you can see here we have all sorts of amazing creatures. Let me draw. So you have your fish right here. And maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but all of these coral, they're actually not rocks. They are individual organisms. So we have all sorts of crazy different diversity here. And this is all within the realm of biology. But that is not it. It's not just these macroorganisms that we think about, but we also have to consider our microorganisms. So this is a bacteria. And bacteria are also living creatures. They are alive and they are surrounding the world all around us. So if biology is a study of life, and life can be macroscopic, or in other words, you can see it with your own eyeballs, or microscopic like these bacteria, what is life? So that's what we're going to work on today, is we're going to actually define what life is. Oh. Let me get rid of these things. Who knew they wouldn't go away? Not me. All right. So first off, life has some sort of organization. And what do I mean by that? I mean that all life kind of proceeds in the same manner. So you start off and life has atoms. Atoms are different types of elements, which is what all of life is made of. An atom is literally the smallest unit of any form of matter that we know of. And then after we have atoms, you get molecules, which are just groups of atoms. And then you have cells. Cells, kind of a big deal. We call cells the basic building block of life because all living creatures have cells. So again, cells, big deal. We love them. And then a bunch of cells get together and make tissues. And if those tissues have the same kind of function, they can work together to make an organ. The organ I'm showing you right here is actually your stomach. And of course, this is where you get food and it digests in this lovely, delicious juice. And then those everything that's been digested goes into the rest of your intestines. Later on in the semester, we're going to learn all about the stomach and how it works as we talk about humans and human organization. Which kind of leads to the next level of organization. So we have our organs, but then, you know, there's not just organs. There's also full organ systems. So this is the digestive system, which means it's not just the stomach, because the stomach isn't how we digest our food by itself. It also includes, you know, your mouth, so you can chew up that food, your salivary glands, that's all the spit in your mouth, all that deliciousness. It goes down your esophagus into your stomach, does all of its good things, then goes into your intestines, where all of the nutrients that were in that food get taken out, and then it goes out of your anus in the form of poop. So all of that together, they kind of serve a similar function. A stomach without the esophagus is kind of useless. So these all work together to aid in digestion. Excuse me, which is why they're an organ system. If they have a similar job and there's multiple organs involved, it becomes an organ system. And then lastly, a bunch of organ systems together can become an organism. And that's a human, is a type of organism. This is any living being. Now, I do think it's worth noting that not all organ systems have this. or organisms have this. Some organisms are what we call unicellular, which literally just means it is made of one cell. But even though there's only one cell, it can still be a complete individual, like a complete organism. But some organisms are multicellular and have all these things. So sometimes we kind of skip all of this part and it goes atom, molecule, cell, organism. But sometimes you get it all. It just depends on the individual. But what's really important here is this organization. So you can see it's organized. It always proceeds in the same manner. You're never going to have a molecule go to an organ system. You first have to have a cell. And the fact that it's kind of codified like this, again, in the exact same order every single time, is what makes life organized, which is, of course, a quality of life. Next off, besides being organized, life also needs energy. Life doesn't just sit, it actually consumes energy, and some life even creates energy. And this energy helps function, as in, like, as a human, we have to walk around. I'm using energy now to talk. I'm also using energy for my heart to beat, and my food to digest itself, and my lungs to breathe in and out. So we use energy in all sorts of ways, and not just humans, but all organisms do this. Even those little bacteria that we talked about at the beginning, they have to move around. They have to consume energy. They have to make energy depending on the bacteria. And the way organisms utilize energy is actually pretty different across the wide range of life. So you have your producers, and producers are also called autotrophs. Oops, here we go. They're also called autotrophs. And they, by definition, make their own energy. Usually this is through the process called photosynthesis. And if you're like, photosynthesis, that's crazy. We're going to learn all about photosynthesis in the next couple months as well. So producers or autotrophs make their own energy. These are things like our plants. If you look outside and you see trees or grass, they don't need to eat anything. They actually can utilize the sun and gain sugar and energy from the sun itself, which is really, really cool. But other organisms have to eat. For example, this beautiful giraffe, it's a primary consumer. You could also think of this as an herbivore, or maybe even you could say a vegetarian. So primary consumers, they eat these producers. They eat the plants and they say, delicious, I love you so much, you're scrumdiddlyumptious. And that's how they survive. They're not going to ever eat different animals. They're just going to eat the plants, which is opposite of our secondary consumers. Secondary consumers, these are carnivores. Or you could sometimes have an omnivore, which eat both plants and other animals. So this beautiful tiger, now they don't live in the same area as a giraffe, so it might not eat a giraffe, but it's going to eat other animals. It's not going to sit there and have a nice salad. It is definitely has to eat animals. So if you want to see kind of like the relationship, this secondary consumer will go on and eat this primary consumer. And then that primary consumer will go on and eat the autotroph. And that's kind of how this energy flow is working. Primary consumers get a lot of energy from the plants, but they also take a lot of energy to digest. Whereas secondary consumers get all their energy from the meat of those primary consumers. This can keep going on to tertiary consumers and quaternary, but usually we kind of stop here. And then there's one more, which is really important, but easy to forget about. And that's what we call our decomposers. And these are the things that eat dead things. Instead of eating our delicious other organisms, they eat dead and decaying matter. This can also mean they eat waste products. So like other organisms poop. So if you have a dog and you maybe let it go out to the bathroom outside, and then you go out like the next day and you notice this like white kind of fungus on it, that's because that fungus is alive and it's a decomposer. And it is eating the poop that your dog will let out in order to get its own energy. This is a slug right in this photo. And this slug also is a decomposer. It'll eat dead and decaying animals, as will this mushroom that it's sitting on. So decomposers, they may not seem like they have the most glorious or what do you call it? Like glamorous life, but they're absurdly important. If you walked around today and you weren't completely surrounded by dead things or poop, you can thank a decomposer for that. So all of this and having energy, needing energy to survive, and the way it works, that is all a quality of life. Next quality of life is reproduction. In other words, they need to make babies. Now, the way they make babies can be really different between different organisms. For example, this adorable little dachshund, here's its 6 sweet little puppies with little crocheted hats on it. I mean, come on, you can't beat that. And they do this by, at one point looking like this, and then they get pregnant. And while they're pregnant, it has to gestate for a really long time. Now, not all organisms do have pregnancy kind of the way this sweet little dachshund does. Some of them can lay eggs, while as other organisms actually just cut themselves in half in order to have babies. But pretty much in reproduction, there is new life created from old life. And the way in which that works, it's a wide range. But, with dachshunds, you get sweet little babies, and so we love that. The other thing that life has to do is it has to respond to stimuli. What does this mean? This sounds real fancy and real scientific. Honestly, it's not. If you ever notice that if you're like in a dark room and somebody turns on the light, or like maybe when you first wake up, your eyes hurt, that's because your pupils are getting a lot smaller. When you're in a dark room, your pupils are really big, like you can see here. And when it gets lighter, they contrast. That is just responding to the stimuli of light. This is something that you have no control over. You do this innately, and you don't even realize you're doing it, but you are. This is also why pirates have eye patches, because they could always have one eye in the dark. So when they went down into the ship of the hull of their ship, they could actually still see because this pupil was still really large, even though outside it was not, which I find absolutely fascinating. Sometimes though, you respond to stimuli and you realize you're responding to it. So you have this cute little old man right here, and he's putting on a sweater because it's cold. So this is responding to the stimuli of temperature. He's cold. He's like, bro, I'm freezing my gazuts off. I need a sweater to put on. By responding to these outside factors, or like I said, we call these stimuli, which is just like kind of a fancy scientific word. It's great for Scrabble if you want to play that tonight. It actually shows that like we're not just living in an environment, we're kind of interacting with it. And that is a quality of life. All things, even your plants, respond to stimuli. They decide when it's time to go through photosynthesis and not. You may have like seen that cute little meme that sunflowers follow the sun, and if they can't find the sun, then they start facing each other. That's actually completely true. But they're doing that and they're moving around the sun to get as much sunlight. And that is a response to stimuli. So it's not just animals, plants do it as well. So do our bacteria, kind of the whole shebang. So in addition to responding to stimuli, organisms also work to maintain what's called a homeostasis. Again, another fancy science world, but we're going to break it down for you. So have you ever been thirsty and got a drink? Or maybe you've been hungry and eaten. Both of those things are to maintain your homeostasis, which homeostasis is just a fancy way of saying your internal balance. So if you're thirsty, that's because your body is, which is 70% water, in case you didn't know, is like, I need more water. I'm trying to do all my things, function the way you want me to, and I literally cannot because I don't have enough water. So your body says, hello, it triggers all these hormones, and it's like, please give me some water, you drink. Similar with food. You don't have enough energy and you want to eat. That's your body's way of saying, listen, I need this energy, please give it to me. It's trying to maintain that internal balance, which we call homeostasis. This also is why you shiver if it's really, really cold. outside, or your body is trying to maintain its internal temperature. You don't want to get hypothermia, God forbid. So you shiver to keep warm. All of that is homeostasis and maintaining kind of that internal balance, making sure you're doing well, you're living your best life. After we have homeostasis, we also have adaptations. Now, really important, adaptations happen over a long time. So we're not going to have an adaptation that happens over like a minute or even one lifetime. They take thousands and thousands of years to happen. So one adaptation is, I'm going to give like a second. Do you see an organism here? Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know. What are you thinking? If you answered yes, maybe you saw this gecko. This is a leaf gecko. But you can see how well it blends into its environment. We call this, of course, camouflage. I'm sure some of you may be aware of that. You wear camo if you want to go hunting, so you blend in so the deer or turkey, or if you hunt, maybe you hunt sandhill cranes, they're supposed to be really delicious. I've never eaten one, but I would like to. They blend, you want to blend in with your environment. That also happens with organisms so that their predators don't see them or their prey. And that is camouflage, and that is incredible, but it takes a really, really long time. We're talking thousands and thousands of years here in order for this adaptation to develop. Similarly, right here, I bet you could guess, what are we trying to talk about? We're trying to talk about protection here. These wonderful giant quills on the top of this porcupine give it a lot of protection. Porcupines kind of don't care about anything. They can walk around and do whatever they need, because they're like, you want to mess with me, bro? That's fine. You get a quill to the face. Literally, their quills are projectiles, so they can shoot them out and hit other organisms. They're also barbed, which means that if you get one in you, it's really, really hard to remove. Which is, again, really cool, really great for the porcupine. Not so great for like your puppy if it tries to go explore a porcupine. But that is an incredible adaptation that it has in order to survive its environment. But once again, happens over a really, really long time, not just like overnight. Thousands and thousands of generations here. And the last one, we have this sweet little polar bear. And you might be like, girl, you already did camouflage above. That's true. So polar bears are white fur, and that is so that they can blend in with their beautiful snowy environment. But what you may not have known is that polar bears actually have black skin. And they do that because in the environments in which they live in, it's freaking cold. That's why there's all that snow and ice. So when they have this black skin, it actually allows their bodies to retain or capture and retain more heat, which makes it much easier to survive in the Arctic tundra. So they have black skin under this fur, which is an incredible adaptation, but it happens over a long time. And it allows them to survive. And that's what I have right here. It just happens over many, many generations. I think that's really important, because when we think about life, and especially when we think about these evolutionary processes and things, sometimes we have a tendency to think, well, like, it's just too perfect. How did this happen? It happened because a lot of things didn't have this black skin or these quills or this absurdly good camouflage, and they died out. And the ones that actually had the good stuff survived. And that's how they could that's how adaptations work. But that has to happen over a really long time. So don't forget that part. So those are the 6 qualities that define life. So now that we know what life is, how is it classified? So scientists can't just let things be. We have to classify things, put little labels, put little sticky notes, maybe little pins in it, the whole shebang. And the way life is the way life is classified in biology is known as taxonomy. Again, if you're playing Scrabble, it's a great word. So taxonomy is just the order in which we organize life. That's it. I know, really simple. There is a very specific ranking system. And I think it's easier to start from the bottom to the top. Started from the bottom, now we're here, as opposed to the top down, but whatever makes more sense to you. So we start first with our species. There is one species, and that includes all individuals that are the exact same type. So Ursus americanus, these are all of your brown bears, or maybe black bears. I think it's brown bears. It's definitely one of the two, I can tell you that much. So all of your brown bears belong in the same species, all of those individuals. Then you move up to genus, and your genus is all kind of similar animals. So all of your bears are in the genus Ursidae, or genus Ursus. So not just your brown bears, your black bears, your polar bears, your sun bears, all of them, they live here. And then you have family Ursidae, which is just, again, one more step up. So it's not just your bears, but do you know what's really closely related to bears? Walruses. I know, kind of shocking. I found it really cool, but they are. Also raccoons. So they all live in this family Ursidae. They're pretty closely related, but not as close as bears, but more closely related than the order, which is Carnivora. These are all of the carnivores. So not just your bears and your walruses, but also all your cats, your dogs, anything that has a special kind of tooth in its mouth is in this order Carnivora. Then you go up again to your class, and those are all of your mammals. So this is where we come in. We're mammals. Amazing. So at the class level, we are the exact same as bears, as the exact same as all mammals. So that's monkeys, that's whales, rhinoceroses, hippos, manatees. If it's a mammal, we're the same class as it, which is really cool. So then that also means that we're the same, all of these four. So class, phylum is one more step up. That's chordata. That means if you have a backbone. So all vertebrates or animals with a backbone, all of our fish, our birds, our reptiles, our amphibians, our mammals, they all live in the same phylum. We're going to go up again to kingdom. And in kingdom level, that is Animalia. In other words, all animals. Every single animal on the planet lives in the same kingdom. And we're going to go one more to domain. Domain is eukarya, which is just a type of cell. Right now, you might be like, girl, I don't know what that means. You will. I promise pretty soon we're going to talk about cells and you'll know what eukarya is. There are 3 domains. We'll talk about all of them, I promise you. So in other words, if we're thinking about taxonomy, you have domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Domain is the largest, species is the smallest. Now, there are all sorts of mnemonic devices or ways in which you can remember this. The one that I like to use, and it just helps me, you could make up your own or look it up, is did King Philip come over for good spaghetti? Or, another S word, whatever makes you happy. And here, this tells you not only what the taxonomy is, but the order of them. And that can be really helpful because are you looking at class, which again is the mammals, all the mammals, or are you all the way down here to genus? So all of life, everything that is a living organism and meets those 6 qualities that we just discussed is classified in this order, which is pretty dang cool. There's people's jobs who it is to decide, are these the same species? Does this belong in this family or does it belong in this other family? We call those people taxonomists. I am certainly not one, and it doesn't sound that fun to me, but I love that it's fun for other people. So now that we've defined what life is, and we've talked about how it's classified, we're going to talk about how all of biology is done. In your labs this semester, you're going to use this exact same methodology. And this is the same methodology used by everybody that's getting a biology bachelor's degree or master's or PhD. Literally Nobel Prize winners, like the top of the top, use this exact same methodology. So we're going to go over it today and you're going to kind of get introduced to it. So that when we're talking about it in lab, you're not just like kind of blindsided and like, girl, what is this? So we call this method, like I said, that everything has used the scientific method. This is also pretty much how other areas of science are done, but we're really going to just focus on biology. In lab, like I said, we're going to break all of these steps down. And by the end of lab, you're going to have done all of them. You're going to have done your own project, written a paper about it, and a presentation. Don't fret. I know that might sound like a lot right now. I promise you, we're going to break it down so that it's really digestible for you. So the very first step is observations. You do this all day, every day. You can observe with your eyeballs, which is sight, which look at these cute little raccoons. They're looking at who knows what. Maybe they're looking at the person taking this picture. Maybe they see some delicious looking trash. Maybe they just got woken up and they're like, what is that noise? But it's really important that observations utilize all senses. So we're not just talking about eyes here. We're talking about smell. We're talking about touch. We're talking about taste. Now, be careful with taste. Maybe don't go around making random things. But, taste is a really important sense. And that is part of the observation. If you're eating a sandwich, is it delicious or not? Maybe your mayonnaise went bad. Maybe your bread's a little bit stale. Or maybe it's the best sandwich you've ever had. And I love that for you. And then, of course, the last one is sound. Sorry, had a complete blank there. Is your sound. What are you hearing? So when we talk about scientific observations, it's really easy to think about just your eyesight, but you really have to utilize all of your senses in order to make the best observations. Scientific observations are also pretty detailed. So it's not just like my sandwich is good. What is good about your sandwich? Tell me what's delicious. Tell me what's not. Give me specificity here. We want details. Scientists, I like to think of scientists as really just incredibly nosy people. And we want to know everything about everything and give us as much information as possible. So once you've made your observations, we then ask questions. Now, these questions can be something as simple as, why does my sandwich taste bad? Or as complex as, what happens to photosynthesizing plants when the sun goes down? Or maybe if I feed my dog a steak and then I feed another dog chicken, which dog is going to survive longer? All of those are totally valid scientific questions. We are inquisitive as scientists, and that is, again, part of what makes us scientists. So we ask lots and lots of questions, some of which have already been asked, and we can Google it and kind of find those answers. And again, we're going to learn how to do that in lab. But some of the questions haven't been asked at all. And that's when you get new discoveries, which is the really fun part. Because really, essentially what being a scientist is observing the world around you and getting to discover brand new things about it, which is absolutely the best. So after we ask our question, we form what's called a hypothesis. Now, some people call this a scientific guess. That's pretty accurate. Other people really don't like that term, but I think it's pretty good. The big thing here is that we do research. We call that a literature search. I know, again, we're very fancy here. So what we do is we use Google and we look at other scientific papers. What did they find? Did they find that dogs that lived on beef worked really well? Maybe they didn't ask you exact question, but did they look at dogs and pork and what did they find there? Or did they look at what beef is really made of and what are the nutritional facts? There's all sorts of research that you can find that might be relevant to your question. And when we do our research, that kind of leads us to our hypothesis. So maybe no one's ever asked this sweet little raccoon if it were to eat a bunch of trash, if it were to like survive on just trash and its friends never had trash, how would its survivorship be different? So how long would they survive differently? Trash raccoon versus non-trash raccoon. Maybe no one's asked that exactly, but maybe someone has seen, okay, when raccoons eat trash, it actually doesn't really affect them. So that kind of helps answer your question. And you can use that to form your hypothesis. A lot of times scientists might have multiple hypotheses, and that's totally fine. We're just trying to figure out, again, we know the world is around us. How does it work? And then we don't just ask questions and stop there. We have to know. Again, we're nosy people. So then we test it. We do this by collecting data. All scientific experiments have to have some sort of data that we can collect. This data also needs to be objective, which means you can't just look at something and be like, oh, that raccoon looks happy. No, what can we measure in order to really determine, is it happy or not? Another way to think about it is if you ask 10 people, is this raccoon happy? They would probably have 10 different answers, which means it's subjective. Whereas if you ask 10 people, what is the weight of this raccoon? They could go to a scale and weigh it, and it would always be the same. Therefore, it's an objective measurement. And in science, we really want as much objectivity as possible, because that's how we know, okay, we're not just coming in with our own biases and what we want to think, that raccoons shouldn't eat trash. We're actually finding a true answer based on what the data show us. Now, I'm going to have a little aside here. There are two different types of science, or in other words, two different ways in which you can collect your data. One is called empirical science. We also call this observational. So you can see we have this woman. She looks a little bit creepy, but we love that for her. And she's sitting there watching this classroom. In observational work, you don't change anything. So we're not sitting there and saying, okay, hey, teach in French one day and see how your students respond. That's a change. Instead, we're sitting there and we're like, do your normal thing. We're just going to watch. And that is called empirical science. Then you have applied science. And here you collect experimental data. This is when you actually change something. So, like I said in my previous example, if you said, all right, we're going to have 20 teachers, 10 of them are going to teach in English, the other 10 are going to teach in French. Let's see how their students' test scores do. You're changing something. You're changing the language in which the teachers are teaching, which makes it experimental data, which means it's an applied science as opposed to empirical. One is not better than the other. It really depends on your question, your hypotheses, your interests, and what makes the most sense for what you're doing in your time. But so they're both completely valid, completely acceptable in science. It just depends on what's most appropriate for what you're doing. And then after we've collected all of our data, be it empirical or applied, then we actually analyze it. We do this in science using statistics. Statistics are a scientist's best friend. I know that this can sound scary because it's a lot of math and people tend to be like, math, hate it, not good at it. We are going to work through this together because yes, later on in the semester, and by later on, I mean like in 2 or 3 months, we will be running statistics. Each one of you will run statistics on data that you have collected in the lab. So we have to analyze it. This is how we can know, is there actually a difference? So instead of just looking and being like, oh, we have our raccoons and some of them are eating trash and some of them are not. Are they surviving different? Well, this one lived to be 9 and this one lived to be 8.5 and this one lived to be 7 and 10 months or something. Is that different enough or is it not? I don't know. So we use statistics and statistics tell us, is there a difference? That is really the whole goal. And that's how we know, okay, if we're saying, yes, trash is bad for raccoons, is because we have stats to back it up. All science and all that we have found is backed up by statistics. Again, it's another way to say, hey, we're not just making stuff up. Hey, I don't just not like when when raccoons eat trash. I actually have mathematics to back up my conclusions. And that is one of the things that makes science and biology really different than just like other things. We wouldn't ever just say, well, my mom said that raccoons shouldn't eat trash, therefore it's bad for them. No, your mom might be a wonderful person. I have no doubt that she is, but she just with her personal experience can't really draw and know what's best for the raccoon. So that's why we need science to really know what's best, and not just for one raccoon, but all the raccoons at large. And then we draw our conclusions based on our statistics. And again, these are always based on statistics. So we have numbers to back it up. We're not just guessing. You know, when scientists say, hey, the COVID vaccine, it helps reduce the amount of COVID. It's not just like, we think so, or it just seems right. It's saying, look, we have math, we collected data. Those data were not biased. And when we did all this, we found, yes, it helps with COVID. And that's a conclusion. And again, it's always based on math. We try as much as we can to reduce our biases because we don't want to come in and be like, well, this is what we want to happen. If somebody is doing that, they're probably not a very good scientist because we have to have stats and we're supposed to remove everything that we want out of the equation and just say, this is what the data show. And that's the really big important part of the scientific method. Now, that's kind of it as far as actually collecting data. But in science, you don't just want to stop here. What if we found incredible research that shows, like, you know what? Raccoons survive so much better with trash. Please put your trash out. Let raccoons get in there. That could really change someone's life. Maybe for the good, maybe for the better. Maybe you hate raccoons and then you're going to hide your trash because you want to kill them. So what we do next is we present our work. And you can do this in the form, like this sweet baby, of a poster or a talk. Right now, I'm presenting you some work. It's not necessarily my own, but I'm giving you information. We give posters and talks at different big scientific conferences. And it's pretty much just like a nerd meeting where a bunch of scientists get together and they're like, oh my gosh, let me tell you about raccoons. And they're like, oh, please, I need to know everything you ever know about raccoons. And that's kind of, really and truthful what we do at conferences. So that's one way, but the only way that people can really get that information is if they go to those conferences or if they know somebody and talk to them. So then the other way we really like to present our work is through publications. And that's really just like writing it up and sending it to a scientific journal. Now, the big thing here is that when science gets published, it goes through the process called peer review. Now, peer review is where other scientists read your work about the raccoons and the food, and they say, yeah, this is good science. Or sometimes they'll be like, what did you do? You don't have enough raccoons to draw these conclusions. Or no, your statistics, not correct. You shouldn't have ran this test. Or, you know what, this could be good, but I just think you need to look at more raccoons, or maybe look at raccoons in different areas. Typically, you get at least 3 peer reviewers. And those aren't just like strangers. So we're not going to be sending our raccoon and food paper to somebody who studies, I don't know, sharks and if they are more active at night or in the day. We're going to send these to other people, or not we, but the editors of the journals, to other people that study raccoons or study nutrition and are really experts in the field. And then they can know, yeah, this is good science. And only after that happens, and after enough people say, this is good, you know what, here's a big check mark, you know what you're doing, can something get published in a scientific journal? That's why scientific journals are a lot more credible than like a Facebook article or, like I said, something that your Aunt Franny told you. They have it, not just that one scientist was like, look, this is good. A bunch of scientists got together and said, this is good. And sometimes, we fail and we're like, oh yeah, this all looks good. It gets published. And other scientists, once it's published, anybody can read it. And they go, absolutely not. This data is not good. And then it gets retracted. And that does happen, not very often, to be fair. But on occasion, they'll be like, I'm sorry, this isn't good. And it gets retracted. So science not only goes through peer review in order to get published, but it's constantly going through peer review in order to make sure that whatever is out there is really good information. And that is very, very important. So again, that when we say something and we're like, look, here's science to back it up, it's not just crap. We're doing it with this peer review in mind. Now, there's one thing that I think, well, maybe multiple, but the one of the things that I think is most important and scientists really fail at is what we call scientific literacy. And what that means is that we don't do a good job communicating all of our work to the masses. Scientific journals are great. And for scientists to be considered successful in their fields and really taken seriously, they have to publish in journals. But journals aren't written for the masses. They're written for the other old weirdo scientists. And so there needs to be better communication between these old weirdo scientists and the masses. So we need to be able to talk to them better. And then maybe the hope of this is that if that happens, there'll be less people that don't trust science or that think, listen, scientists just sit there in their labs and make crap up. No, you could really understand, or the masters could really understand, look, there's statistics to back this up. This is how the data were collected. So scientific literacy is a huge issue. And I thought that maybe I could give you an example of this. So if I was to tell you about my PhD research, I could tell you that macrophalid parasitization of aquatic crustaceans altered the ecological niche of crustaceans, causing a shift in ecosystem services. Now, that is completely true. And if I was talking to other old crazy scientists, that might be what I say. But to be honest, unless you study parasites, this macrophalid means absolutely nothing to you. Ecological niche, most scientists will know that, but even that's very much based on my own field. And I'm sure, after I read that, some of you are probably like, what the heck is she even speaking English? And that's because this is meant for scientists. So instead, we need to be able to utilize, the same information, but actually be able to communicate it in a more effective way. This isn't like quote unquote dumbing it down or altering the information. It's just making it so it's actually digestible for real people. So one example of this is instead of saying all of this crap that nobody could really understand, you could instead say parasites change animal behavior in ways that impact all life. This is just as equally true as this above. And it is really the crux of my dissertation. This is why I got a PhD, is right here, because I found stuff about this. And I bring this up because you're like, hey, I don't think I'm really going to not be scientifically literate, or I'm going to be talking like this first example. But here's the deal. I have been a scientist for kind of a long time, and I've lived in our little scientific bubble. And I try really hard to communicate well and communicate like this. But without a doubt, sometimes I talk like this. And if you don't understand that, that is not a failure on your part. That doesn't mean, hey, you need to be better. It means, hey, I need to communicate better. So if you feel as though I'm talking like this first example, please let me know so I can be a better science communicator and kind of actually make it understandable for real people instead of just like other nerdy scientists. So that is biology. That's what life is. And that's how we do it. This was a lot of information for one day. And I know it might seem like a little bit overwhelming, but it's all so necessary in order to really understand biology. And it's really important to know that biology, just like a lot of other classes that you take, is going to build on each other. So what we talk about in day one, we will still be drawing on the last day of this semester. Well, I'll remind you, don't forget, all of life is organized the same way. All of life needs cells. Hey, does life respond to stimuli? Hey, is this a peer-reviewed article, or are you just kind of pulling this out of, nowhere? So don't be overwhelmed. Please don't. But now you know what biology is and how we do it. And I think those are both really important things. As always, you can email me if you have any questions about the lecture or the class or absolutely anything. And truly, I hope you have a great day and you enjoyed this. I will see you in the next recording.